I had to beat an old lady with a stick to get these cranberries.
It's a waste of life!
Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, those who lie betwixt or outside. I am your host, William Fancyson, joined, of course, by my co-host, Hillary Clinton.
Yep.
With yet another episode of Avant Garbage.
Yeah, we missed a week. We were celebrating Yom Kippur,
Which did not occur, but...
Well, yeah, but we wanted to celebrate, it's just sort of the idea of Yom Kippur,
Yeah. Yeah. What is Yom Kippur? What does the observance mean to you?
I really just connect with the Yom.
Uh-huh.
And I really have a great respect for the Kippur. And sort of when they meet in the middle and they form one title for a holiday, that really connects to me emotionally, makes me really think about it.
I'm very glad. So, there was an episode recorded, and it may or may not have been lost due to my incompetence, but it will not happen again.
I am suing him. I'm in the process, so don't. It's a class action suit, so if you were affected by our absence for a week, you were a loved one, then you may be entitled to join my lawsuit against my co-host. Wouldn't be the first podcast lawsuit, and it won't be the last.
Mm-hmm. You're going to sue me for, was it $10 million or something?
I want to say it was like $20 or $30 million.
Okay.
If you don't know, we're talking about the biggest problem in the universe.
The LOL suit.
LOL suit. Yeah, if you don't know what that is, look up biggest problem in the universe.
I'm just saying, whenever we get to whatever number biggest problem did, we can ask Dick Masterson on.
Yeah, was that an offer he said on the show?
Yeah.
He'll go on any podcast with more episodes than than the original show got.
Mm-hmm.
We got to speed run these then. We're switching we're doing daily upload of podcasts, and that's a promise. Straight.
Mm-hmm.
We 100% will every day upload, and if it doesn't happen, it's Squilliam's fault, and he will take financial liability.
Since you especially, I think, are very passionate about the subject of today's episode, would you like to explain what the topic is, or what the movies we've chosen today are, and exactly what you think we want to, there was a specific angle going into this?
Yeah, we're talking about the Rocky series.
Specifically movies 1 through 4.
Yeah, because I haven't seen 5 or 6, but based on general public consensus, I think you've seen both, or you haven't seen 5, but you've seen 6.
I've seen 6.
They're not quite as good as 1 through 4. But basically, usually we try to cover lesser known movies. For example,
Poughkeepsie Tapes.
Poughkeepsie Tapes or Brimstone. We cover these lesser known movies, try to spread awareness, even though our audience isn't very large. Eventually, that would be the point of the show. Once we get a larger audience, we're spreading awareness on these lesser known movies. But we're talking about a movie series that's super well known. Probably total series, one of the highest grossing movie series of all time. But the reason I want to talk about it is I think, while it has a general level of respect from a lot of people, I think a lot of people, especially people who are into movies in a more pretentious sort of way, similar to us, don't respect that the Rocky movies aren't just really popular movies. They're actually, many of them are actually really good movies just from a filmmaking, artistic, critical lens.
It's really interesting to me because the current perception, I think, of Sylvester Stallone and the Rocky movies is just that, he makes cheesy bad movies now. He's always made cheesy bad movies. But I really feel like people forget that, the first Rocky that came out in 1976 won Best Picture, Best Director, and Sylvester Stallone was nominated for Best Actor.
Yeah, I mean, if you just want to jump right in, we're going to talk about 1 through 4 in chronological order. And, I think the biggest argument as to why people underrate, or at least people who are more, the
Film
audience
snobs.
of people who are listening to an indie movie, we're not quite indie, but underground, lesser-known movie podcast.
James.
May not give the Rocky movies the respect I think that they deserve. And the most... good from a purely artistic, sort of Oscar style way of looking at a movie where you want it to have
character drama
and like thematic, big thematic through lines is Rocky 1, which I would argue is actually a Oscar worthy and
deserved it.
Genuinely like high brow, good thematic movie.
I don't know what else came out in 1976, but it probably wasn't as fucking good as Rocky 1.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wanted to, before we get into the synopsis, I wanted to give a little bit of backstory to Sylvester Stallone upon making this movie, because there's a little bit of lore.
Well, Rocky is almost an autobiography if you imagine his takeoff of his film career as boxing. What boxing is to Rocky is selling the script of Rocky. I mean, honestly, Sylvester Stallone, the Rocky 1 is almost autobiographical. You know? Yeah,
so Sylvester Stallone was basically a Goomba from, like, Philly, and he... Well, I actually don't know if he's from Philly, but probably. But he's just an Italian-American dude who's working class, and he had dreams of being a filmmaker / actor. He had a bunch of shit, and at one point he was so financially desperate, he had to sell his dog. And eventually, legend has it, once he sold the script for Rocky, he bought the dog back.
I think it's true.
No, I know. I'm just saying, like, it's mythologized, like, part of this, the mythology around the movie. And that dog, Buckus, is in the movie, the first 3 movies, as Rocky's dog. And so he
retired to a farm.
He was super financially destitute. He finally sells his script, wins it, or wins Oscars for it, becomes... At one point, he directs the first 4 movies. Really fucking good director, honestly.
Yeah.
I would love if... You know how Clint Eastwood now just, like, directs movies occasionally? I would love if Stallone came back to, like, direct a serious movie nowadays. I feel like that'd be really cool. Like, he's just been making, like, Rambo movies that suck for, like, the last 20 years.
What is a Rainbow movie?
Rambo.
Oh, Rambo.
Like, Rambo sequels.
Okay.
The Rambo sequels jumped the shark to a point where even the Rocky movies didn't. Because as we'll get to, the cheesiest Rocky movie is still somehow, like, emotionally resonant. But do you want to start with the character of Rocky where he is in the beginning of Rocky 1?
Yeah, I think we should be brief with the synopsis because...
Yeah, we can go through.
Most people have seen these. But basically, a brief sort of plot summary is Rocky... is like he works as like an enforcer, like he shakes people down who are late on protection money or debts with some sort of gambling involved low-level mobster guy, and he's an amateur boxer who used to have a lot of promise but is now just sort of like fighting at like a bargain bin basement fucking like bar where they do boxing fights. And then you have this other character, Apollo Creed,
who's basically Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, he's the world heavyweight boxing champion. He's like this showman. I would say loosely based on Muhammad Ali, because, you know, a lot of aspects of Muhammad Ali's like bravado and persona don't carry through. Like, he doesn't like speak in rhymes, you know, the same way Muhammad Ali.
Which is actually the way you defeat white people, is that if you just speak in rhymes, we can't defend that.
Which is confusing because poetry is one of the widest possible forms of art. Well, just think about all the fucking poets that people like.
Just think about Johnny Cochran, though. That's how he won the OJ
That
trial.
is true.
Yeah, we can't defend it. I also just want to give a shout out to Carl Weathers, who plays Apollo Creed. He's fucking really good in the first 4 of these movies.
Yeah.
Like, he's maybe my favorite character, aside from, like, Rocky himself. He just comes out, it's really cool because he starts, spoiler alert, I mean, you've probably already seen the movie, but the movie series, but he does eventually become Rocky's friend rather than antagonist, and he's just a really nice character.
Yeah.
But he is a showman, and he is going to defend his title, but I'm pretty sure it's his opponent has to pull out due to the injury, so he decides to do this big marketing thing, which is to allow basically any boxer from
any amateur boxer
from Philadelphia.
It's like a lottery
to fight him for the world title, you know, in Philadelphia, to like sell out a show or whatever. Because a common thread throughout these movies is that Apollo is like kind of a genius promoter.
Yeah, basically. Then obviously Rocky is the one that ends up eventually getting selected through the process of the random lottery, and he there's a lot more drama throughout the second half of this movie, but to be brief, he basically decides to call, I think there's a point in the first movie where he almost, fails and decides not to do it, but then he rises to the challenge, and he basically uses his opportunity he gets to try to basically make something out of himself. Because the big character drama of Rocky, and there's a speech his trainer Mick gives, but it's basically he had promise as a boxer, but he threw it away, and he's now getting a second chance to make something of himself. And he basically, and there also a plot line, there's a romantic sort, not quite a subplot because it's really well done and integral to the plot.
Do you want to explain the side characters real quick, just because they'll come up throughout the rest of it?
Yeah.
So Mick is his trainer. He's loosely based on, so Rocky is pretty much based on Stallone himself and then the real life boxer Rocky Marciano.
Yeah.
And Mick is based on Rocky Marciano's trainer. He's this old Jewish guy who's a former boxer, and he trains Rocky.
Yeah.
And one of the things, if you want to do your Mickey impression about that speech you were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's the main sort of point of the first movie, or the Rocky's character drama. We have this speech where it's like, why I hate you, Rock? Because you could have been something, but you didn't. You could have been somebody, but you wasted it. And it's sort of that's basically the main sort of emotional through line, is that Rocky has wasted all the potential he had, which causes him, that's sort of the problem he has to solve in the movie. And I assume this is something that Sylvester Stallone felt about himself, because of how loosely autobiographical this is.
Yeah.
And then the two other important side characters, we obviously covered Apollo already, is you have
Paulie and Adrian.
And Adrian is just a woman that he likes, he wants to date, and she works at a pet shop. That I think that's how he meets her.
Yeah.
But he basically, she sort of throughout the movie, she ends up sort of representing Rocky's drive. When there's a lot of moments where, the big boxing matches. There's a lot of moments where right before Rocky kind of powers up, because they are kind of structured like anime fights.
Oh yeah.
Right before he does his big shonen power up, it cuts to Adrian. In the first movie, Adrian isn't at the boxing fight at the end, and then she runs into the stadium right as Rocky starts to
make his comeback,
Creed's ass, and make his comeback. And so you have her, who sort of, in the purpose of the narrative, she basically, I guess she represents some sort of, I'm not exactly sure, but she basically is the positive version of what, I guess she believes in him.
Well, she's hope, and she's everything pure in Rocky's life.
Yeah, and she believes in him, and so that sort of his power of just believing in himself and trying to work with what he's got is represented by her, and because she believes in him so much. And by the end of the movie, he ends up dating her and marries her immediately in the second movie.
And Paulie.
Paulie is he's her brother, Adrian's brother, who she lives with. And he's basically the most cynical, skeevy fuck ever. But he's likable by the end of it. But in the first movie, he's almost completely a sort of antagonistic character who's trying to keep Rocky away from Adrian, because he kind of wants to control Adrian, basically.
He's pretty abusive.
Yeah, and it's kind of just implied in the first movie, and it's kind of retconned later on because he becomes more of a lovable rascal later on. But in the first movie, he's very much villainous,
And do you want to take this to, as leading up to the big fight, you get the famous Rocky training montage.
Yeah.
Which is just as hype as they're made up to be if you haven't seen them. Just YouTube them if you haven't seen that shit. I want to point out the soundtrack for this movie, and throughout the entire tetralogy that we're reviewing today, probably the best single, series score ever, if you add all of it together. Yeah. Because there's a famous Going the Distance. As well as Gonna Fly Now, or the two amazing
If you don't know, Going
tracks.
the Distance is what was sampled in Victory. One of my favorite rap songs, or just any song of all time. But That's why that one. Going the distance is an amazing track. It's more orchestral in the first two, and then the Survivor does 3 and 4. I mean, you still have the orchestral beats to them, but Survivor is involved in this. The songs, Eye of the Tiger, famous song, is in 3.
I will say Survivor absolutely kills it.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's that, and there's Gonna Fly Now, which of course has been iconic. And during the training montage, there is the famous Rocky steps, where he runs up the steps to, I can't remember, I think it's a museum in Philadelphia is where that is.
It's either a museum or it's some sort of sports stadium, I don't know which one.
Regardless, in front of it, he runs up a bunch of steps, and, that becomes something that happens throughout the rest of the movies, or this one and Rocky 2. And it's just kind of iconic.
But basically, he decides he has to make something out of himself with this second chance that he's gotten. Trains very hard, and he sort of has this speech where he says, I don't think I'm able to beat him, but I just want to go the distance. I just want to know that I gave it everything that I have. And then, obviously, we get to the fight.
Oh, I just want to say, for the benefit of the gay nerds who listen to this podcast, if you're unfamiliar with the sport of boxing, going the distance would mean there's a certain amount of rounds a boxing fight lasts, and if there's a knockout,
it's 15.
Yeah, if there's a knockout, obviously that stops the fight. But if you go the entire distance, then it goes to a judge's decision.
Yeah.
And so, because Apollo's he's seen as such a giant underdog, simply surviving Apollo, let alone being competitive, would be seen as a huge moral victory for Rocky.
Yeah, and he's basically just sort of, the idea of going the distance for him is just representing, I want to give this everything I have. And no, because in boxing, you can answer a 10 count. You're never, refs can call it, but usually, even if it looks like you got obliterated or are unconscious, refs will give a 10 count. And basically, it's sort of that idea that Rocky's I'm just going to keep getting back up to give it everything I have. I don't want to give up, basically. Sort of the idea is he gave up on his potential originally, and now he has this second shot, so he's, no matter what, he knows he can't, control whether he beats Apollo on a skill level, but he's I'm not going to give up. I'm just going to make sure I don't do that.
And much like the shonen protagonist, he gets basically better over the course of the fight.
Yeah. So basically, the fight itself, is the last 10 minutes of the movie, and sort of the structure it follows is it starts with him in the first round. He gets destroyed basically, and Apollo is he's a guy. He's not a super powerful puncher. But Rocky's getting hit a lot. He's not super beaten up immediately, but he's hit a lot. And then Rocky, hits him with a couple good shots and surprises the crowd. But basically, throughout the course of the fight, they're sort of going back and forth. But Apollo is definitely winning because he has more skill. And he's decently ahead. Rocky is extremely surprisingly competitive in the fight. And the main thing that Rocky uses his advantage is he takes way more shots than Apollo does, but he just keeps fighting through them.
He has just the most willpower and determination and just physical durability of any man in the world.
Yeah. And then sort of the big moment of the movie and the fight is in I think it's the second to last round maybe. Apollo finally knocks him down. It might not be the first time, but it's a big moment where Apollo knocks him down, and it looks like he's finally landed a big enough shot to put him down, and Rocky is still able to stand up and answer the count, and there's just this beautiful shot of you can see Apollo's face, and he just looks absolutely defeated, even though he's going to win the fight if it goes to decision, which it probably will. There's no way Rocky's probably going to knock him out. But Apollo just looks absolutely defeated. Because Rocky has just refused to give up, it just shocks Apollo to his core, and it makes the crowd go absolutely crazy.
And in the final round of the fight, Rocky goes on to beat the fuck out of Apollo. He completely turns the tables.
Yeah, he breaks his ribs with body shots.
And that's a great, once again, talking about some sort of shonen battle shit. You know how it's always in especially a JoJo fight or something. It's always this one stratagem they have that completely changes the fight.
What the hell's a stratagem?
Look like a one strategic move, right?
Yeah.
And so for Rocky, it's basically the idea of, in boxing, you can go for the head or you can go for the body.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go for the body, you'll leave your head open. Rocky, because his skull is impenetrable, he decides to just start flying, just going crazy on Apollo's ribs, even though that means he's going to be hit in the face a lot.
Yeah, and so basically he ends up in the final round getting the best of Apollo, and not almost knocking him out, but really fucking him up.
Like I said, breaks his rib.
Yeah, breaks his rib, and it goes to a decision, which Apollo wins, but it's close.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, Rocky sort of, he's done what he said he wanted to do. He didn't give up, and he used his shot for everything he had. And what I noticed is in the first movie, they actually don't state the decision.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and I like that, because it sort of leaves it open for, like, how optimistic do you want to be?
Mm-hmm.
You can decide, do you think Rocky won? Do you think, but, I think that the answer that's heavily implied is Apollo won.
Yeah.
But it leaves it open for the audience in a way that I kind of enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, I believe you went on a rant about this, is how part of the inspiration to this podcast about how, quote, Rocky 1 is literally Kino.
Yeah.
Also, well, yeah, they say it's split decision, which in boxing speak means that there's 3 judges.
I'm not sure if it's 3 judges in boxing.
Okay.
At least there's an odd number.
Yeah, there's an odd number of judges, and it means that, a majority of them went for one guy, but there were dissenting judges.
Yeah.
And so that means that even if Rocky lost, which it's revealed that he did, one person thought he did enough to be awarded the fight.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, that's basically the first movie,
You have any thoughts to that one overall?
It's the most, from a highbrow filmmaking perspective, it's the most densely rich with, thematic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think basically the idea of sort of this guy, kind of an everyman, but also kind of like a wasted potential, kind of a deadbeat, kind of an everyman who didn't, rise above and sort of show what he's made of, who believes he could if he had a second chance, and then get that chance and show people what he's actually made of is just a good... I mean, it's still a relatively simple sort of hero's journey, basic, thematic story, but I just love the idea he starts just as a complete deadbeat and really believably ends up becoming, almost a world champion boxer. It's a split decision.
And a hero to the city of Philadelphia.
Yeah. Which you get more into in the second movie, but it's obvious that the crowd
And the movie basically ends with the iconic thing where he looks, the TV cameras are on him, and he goes, "Yo, Adrian, we did it!"
Yeah.
I will point out throughout this, I have maintained Sylvester Stallone is a good actor.
Yeah.
However, his way of speaking is largely incomprehensible throughout a lot of it. That Rocky is he is a street tough man.
Yeah.
And he talks in a very fucking caveman-ass dialect. So there's a lot of scenes where it can almost come off as funny even though it's not intended that way. And I don't think that's a mark against the movie. It's just me...
mark against Sylvester Stallone as a human being.
Yeah.
Well, it's basically he doesn't speak very articulately.
Yeah.
And so when he gets emotional, it kind of just sounds like he's making
Yeah.
it just sounds like he's making indiscriminate noises of emotion when he gets when Mickey dies in Rocky 3, when he's crying over his body, he literally is just going it sounds like I don't know, it sounds like incoherent, like sort of moaning or emotional
as an ugly
noises.
crier, I understand.
Well, yeah, but it's even if you're an ugly crier, usually... But he's trying to talk. He's saying things, technically. Yeah. He's not just, crying and making noise. He's supposedly speaking, but it just comes out in a way that's incomprehensible to the human ear.
Mm-hmm. And so, do you want to go into... Oh, I guess I would say, this movie, I'd give it, an A. It's really fucking good.
Maybe a high A-.
Yeah. 92, 93, somewhere in that range. And it's probably the best movie in the series.
It's not the one I enjoy the most, but if I had to present it to
a film class,
it would be the one I would talk about.
And now we enter Rocky 2.
Yeah.
So Rocky 2 opens as the first one ends. There's sort of a recap of the very end of it. And we see Apollo and Rocky being taken to the hospital. Apollo clearly states there will be no rematch.
No, he states there will be no rematch in the
ring.
ring. But then immediately, once they rolled him into the hospital, he challenges Rocky to a rematch.
Yeah, which is very clear. Like, the character of Apollo is kind of skeevy. He's, like, all about the bag.
Well, no, in this case, I don't think it's that he really doesn't want a rematch. Apollo is sort of, his pride has been hurt, because I think at some point between getting into the hospital, he realized that people think Rocky won a moral victory. And so he's offended by that. And he wants to knock Rocky out because even though he definitely won the match, he doesn't like that Rocky was able to win a moral victory over him.
And it kind of, it's part of the seeds of what, like, a lot of times when you want to take a villain and turn him into a good guy, what you do is you would include admirable, and of course I don't know if they intended that making Rocky 2, like I don't know if Rocky 3 was already in their head, but Apollo's, like, pride and competitive spirit is kind of an admirable quality, that he feels these things have been unresolved, so he wants another fight. And it's like a very likable... Apollo subplot throughout this movie makes him a lot more endearing to me, because of the fact that he truly just loves to be competitive.
Yeah.
And he can't, like... He can't live with the fact that there's any uncertainty over who won.
Yeah, I think he's more pure and honestly motivated just by wanting to be the best boxer in the world and wanting to win, in a way that makes him a lot more empathetic than in the first, or sympathetic in the first, and then in the first movie where he sort of portrayed as this, like, purely businessman who's, like, soullessly thinking of, like, oh, I'm gonna do this, like, America fake patriotic angle, you know. Whereas in this one, it sort of turns around and he's becoming a more understandable and, by extension, likable character.
And also that could say something to the fact of, like, a lot of things of, you know, you like to judge people by how they react to things, right? And that kind of tests their character. Of when he was comfortable, he becomes this total asshole. But once he's challenged, he becomes a lot more, like, respectable.
Yeah, he rises to the challenge and wants to fight Rocky again. And then, you know, I mean, I want to be briefer with 2, just because I think 2's not as great of a movie.
Yeah, the one thing I will say I like about the movie, it's a less good movie just from, like, watching it. The one thing I appreciate conceptually is the idea of, like, the rejection of a happy ending. Because Rocky is about the most, like, saccharine a movie can end. And immediately when we pick up in Rocky 2, the character drama is centered around the fact that, like, you don't just walk off into the sunset after one win. Rocky pretty quickly squanders all of the money he made from the fight. Adrian he marries her.
It's not really implied that he runs out, but he's spending it at a rate that he has to make money the way he made money immediately after the fight. He tries to do some ad deals and stuff to capitalize off the fame, but he just realizes he can't do anything but fight and provide for his family.
And he marries Adrian. Adrian becomes pregnant.
Yeah.
She gives premature birth and is put into a coma.
Yeah. That plot is just kind of weird.
Yeah, it is. I was also going to say that basically the rematch is offered to him, and
he retires at first because he doesn't want to fight anymore. But he realizes it's the only way he can provide for that. I was saying that earlier, but I forgot to mention the reason. Is he wants to avoid fighting because I think he's in some level satisfied with taking Apollo the distance. And but he realizes he can't provide for his family any other way than fighting. And so he accepts the rematch with Apollo. And there's sort of this idea that early in the movie, Adrian doesn't support him fighting again. And he can't train well. He's just, like, he's not doing well.
And especially when she falls into the coma, he completely stops
training.
training.
Well, he stops training, yeah. But then once she wakes up, which this is the thing I don't like about this movie at all, is there's no character moment. She just goes into a coma and then she wakes up and decides she supports him fighting now. But once he does that, he's able to, like, train super good and get his fire back. And that's my main criticism, is I don't get, there's this whole plot line that's centered around Adrian not wanting him to fight, but she just then decides on a whim to support him fighting. There's not a reason why she changes her mind in the movie. You know?
I guess it could just be the change in, like, she realizes how Rocky is psychologically affected.
How did she realize that when she was in a coma?
I don't know.
That's just my point.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's because she had a kid.
Yeah.
But I feel like that should have been more of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And basically, he there's a great scene. We actually watched part of this with our father, and there's a scene that I want to talk about where Apollo and his manager are in like their like meeting room together talking about the rematch.
Yeah.
And what they're talking about is his chances in a rematch against Rocky. And there's something specifically his manager says to him where, do you want to give it?
Yeah. Basically, his manager, Apollo's saying, like, I really want this guy. I know I can beat him, knock him out. And the manager basically says, like, you're a way better boxer than me. You have more skill in every level. But that guy, you hit him harder than I've ever seen anybody get hit. You beat him worse than I've ever seen anybody get beat. And he kept coming. And he, like, gets in close, and he's like, that man is crazy. We don't need a man like that in our lives. You know?
His, I don't know the actor who plays his manager, but he is fucking amazing in these movies.
Yeah, he's basically just telling Apollo, like, you absolutely outclass him in any contest of skill, but he has such a fire in him that I don't believe any skill deficit could make you beat him so bad that he would stop.
Rocky literally is the chosen undead from Dark Souls. He keeps, like, where all the deaths are canon, he just keeps coming back.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
And so Apollo, basically, his entire subplot throughout the movie, I was just going, like, in a non-linear way, going back through every one of... His thing is just, he gets more and more angry at Rocky for just existing, basically.
Yeah.
And he needs to prove that he's the best.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically... Leading up to the rematch, finally Adrian wakes up from the coma. Rocky's able to train again. He and Mick go and train a ton, and there's kind of a repeat of the first movie where he runs the steps again, but there's also just a bunch of random school children who
bunch
follow
of kids
him.
follow him because he's a celebrity now.
Yeah, and...
I would argue an unrealistic amount of kids. It's like 300 kids.
However, you did say if you were a kid in the playground in the 70s and saw Rocky running by, you'd probably also run after him.
Well, I also wonder how many of them were planned extras, and then maybe some kids just saw them filming Rocky run up the steps and joined the crowd of children.
I have to imagine they reached out to like an elementary school or something to help film that.
Yeah.
And he goes up and he jumps and it's like, woo, Rocky, Rocky.
Yeah.
And then do you want to get into...
I mean, the fight itself...
Oh, we need to talk about how they train... Also... Going into the fight, what Rocky's strategy is with his eye.
Oh yeah, it's just kind of a boring, like overly technical part of the movie.
I still wanted to talk about it.
He has a bad eye from what Apollo did to him because he leads with his left foot.
Or leads with his right foot.
His right foot.
So he has problems with his right eye.
So his right eye got the shit beat out of him. So he learns to fight left foot forward,
which is orthodox.
Which is orthodox stance. The other one is southpaw. And he...
Even though he's a natural southpaw fighter.
Yeah, even though he's a natural southpaw, so he doesn't risk getting blinded in that eye. And the plan is basically in the final, like when he has Apollo on the ropes to switch, so he can surprise him and then really put it on him. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
so getting to the actual fight, a lot of it to begin is kind of a repeat of the first fight.
Yeah.
Where Apollo's getting on him, he's getting on him, he's getting on him. And he has... basically, he's weathering the storm, but it's also a little awkward for him because he is fighting out of his non-native stance. To explain once again for people who don't get boxing, is that like southpaw, if you're left-handed, that's what that means. Orthodox is right-handed. So imagine doing
something... Most people usually fight
with their dominant hand.
Their dominant hand back. Like, if you think about it, if you're right-handed, you'll have your left foot forward in your stance, and if you're left-handed, you'll have your right foot forward. And
the reason that is because then that's your power hand, where you can generate it. But just think about the idea of, for people who don't get it, of like doing some task you do with your dominant hand with your non-dominant.
It's like writing with your other hand. It's just you have so much muscle memory if you're a pro boxer from a specific stance, and then you change it up. It's so awkward.
And so that's Rocky throughout a lot of the fight. He's weathering the storm. He does get in some...
Very similar to the fight from the first one.
He gets some good body shots in again.
Yeah.
But going into the last round...
well, I think going into the last round, he's doing better than he did
before by switching, because Apollo didn't train against an orthodox fighter. He trained prepared for a southpaw fighter.
Yeah.
And going into the final round, he switches, and he... finally starts unleashing on him. Apollo basically has no answer.
Until late into the final round, They're basically just no guard, no
Wailing
defense,
on each other.
just throwing haymakers back and forth. And then Rocky throws one that knocks both of them down at the same time.
Because the momentum of the shot.
Yeah.
He's so unsteady.
Well, he's so almost close to being unconscious anyways.
Yeah.
And, again, quick boxing, you're able to answer a 10 count. If you get knocked on the ground from a punch, they count the 10, and if you don't stand up before the 10, you're out. You get knocked out. And Rocky and Apollo are both down, and they're both trying to stand up, and Rocky stands up 1 second before the count ends, and Apollo doesn't, and therefore Rocky wins.
And it's also kind of, just the way they show Apollo getting up, it's perhaps he could have gotten up, but he's mentally broken, and that,
he starts to get up quicker than Rocky, but falls.
Yeah, he just stops and falls and slumps against it.
Yeah.
And so there's a implication that he might have just been mentally broken by Rocky.
I don't know. I don't think there is.
May not mentally broken, but at least he gave up whatever he... Either his body gave out on him, or he gave up, but...
Yeah.
Apollo loses, Rocky is the world champ, and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah.
So overall, not as good as the first one. I'd give it a B.
I'd say this is the worst of the 4 we're covering.
But it's still a good movie.
Yeah, it's not, but it's really slow.
Yeah.
It's way too long before he decides to fight again.
Mm-hmm. But I still would say watch it as part of the series. If you're good, watch it, and also just grading it on the scale of all movies, it's still pretty good. It's a Rocky movie.
Yeah, it's a decent movie. It's a decent but pretty slow movie. And I didn't like the Adrian decision point where she arbitrarily changes her mind. So I felt like the character drama that was done so well in the first is completely butchered in this one, and it's just all about watching him fight Apollo, which is good. It's great.
And like I said, the Apollo scenes are some of my favorite.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of a weird in-between as the series goes in a much more campy, fun direction, and the first one is so, dramatic and powerful that it's sort of this weird in-between, sort of botched abortion where it doesn't do the drama extremely well, but it also waits so long to get to the fun training montage big fight that neither aspect shines fully, and it's sort of a compromise in both ways.
Once again, I still recommend you watch it.
I recommend you watch it. I just think in the context of the other ones, it's clearly the worst.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't watch it just as a movie. I would watch it just because it's important to the plot of all the movies.
All right.
I think mostly just for the character development of Apollo, it's important to watch it.
Just like we were talking about that scene of we don't need a man like that in our life.
Yeah.
It's like, have you ever seen that Doom trailer or whatever, where it's you are the one, he's the only one they fear, or something like that, or it's.
I've heard it. I think I understand. But
it's that kind of vibe, is what I'm saying. Anyways, you want to go into Rocky 3?
Yeah, and this is the one I want to cover pretty quick, just because I think 4 and 1 are the 2 best movies.
Well, I do want to talk about. I just want to talk a lot about Clubber Lang, and not really the beginning of the movie, but. The opening montage I wanted to talk about first. So we see a string of title defenses made by Rocky, basically, where he keeps dominating people and beating the fuck out of them. But he also, as it goes on, he gets more and more, commercial. He starts doing it, you can see him doing a bunch of corny ass,
he becomes
ads.
a celebrity, you see him, throwing the first... I don't know if this is actually stuff that happened, but...
Yeah.
Handshaking the president, throwing the first pitch at a baseball game. He sort of goes into the role of where Apollo was, where he's very much just a celebrity guy, and he's soaking up the status.
Although it initially focuses just on Rocky, who starts getting cut in is this guy named Clubber Lang, who's played by Mr. T. Yeah. And he's a young, hungry... He's what Rocky was in the first one. Yeah. There's an intentional parallel in the way, they're showing him... Training. Basically, intercut is... It starts with Rocky just fighting, and then intercut is Rocky being a celebrity, and then it cuts back and forth between Rocky doing celebrity shit and then Clubber Lang training. But the training he does is specifically, it's made to look a lot like the training montage from the first Rocky movies, where he's in a dingy fucking garage doing push-ups or running on the street. Or hitting a heavy bag in the most rundown looking gym ever. They also, even at one point, he has a dog with him, which is Rocky and his bull mastiff.
And it's basically, it's intercutting Rocky sort of slacking off and soaking up the celebrity that comes with being world champion.
Mm-hmm.
And then Clubber Lang, like, having that fire of competition and being like a single-minded, like, machine who's just training like hard and has no renown, but is just doing it because he has that fire.
And basically, he's climbing up the rankings until he becomes the number one contender, and that's where the montage ends.
Mm-hmm.
And he calls out Rocky.
Mm-hmm.
First, there's a thing that just really isn't related to the rest of it. Basically, Paulie's an alcoholic. Rocky decides to give him a job to try to get him off his feet. Rocky fights Hulk Hogan in an exhibition match.
Yeah.
It's not important.
It's for charity. You know, it's kind of a fun part of the movie.
It's fun to watch. Doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
I will note this movie, whereas the other Rockies are all 2 hours. This one's like basically 90 minutes.
Yep.
And it flies by in a really
good
way.
does.
But basically, Clubber Lang calls him out. Rocky attempts to retire, but he decides to take the fight.
In case you're worried, Mr. T does use his catchphrase, pity the fool, which kind of doesn't make sense because Clubber Lang is a fictional character, not Mr. T, but he uses his catchphrase. And yeah, basically he calls Rocky out, and Rocky at first says he's going to retire, and then Clubber Lang says he's going to fuck Rocky's wife, and Rocky decides he wants to beat him up. And Mickey's telling him,
you can't get this because you don't have fire anymore.
It sort of mirrors the speech that Apollo's trainer gave to Apollo, but he's basically saying, Clubber Lang, like, you're a great boxer, like, you can beat up great boxers, you're the best in the world, but Clubber Lang has such like a fire and a rage, and he wants this so bad that you are going to get destroyed by him because he wants to kill you. You want to defend your title and, box. He wants to kill you, basically.
Yeah. And so, despite Mick not wanting him to, he trains for the fight, and he half-asses the training.
Yeah, the training session, what they show is another intercut is the one training session they show is Rocky's doing like an open to the press, watch the world champion training session. And intercut with that is Clubber Lang again, like in a fucking I think it's just him doing pull-ups.
Yeah.
In like the most run-down ass looking building, just doing pull-ups. Intercut with Rocky doing like fucking like training in front of the press. There's like a band playing.
I just want to point out that also Clubber Lang is a hero of the cluster punk aesthetic because some of the outfits he puts together in this movie are completely fucking insane.
Oh yeah, at one point he's dressed up like the Native American Village People guy. He's got these giant feather earrings he wears. And
Mr. T is so cool looking that he just makes me not question the outfit.
Yeah, he pulls off the most ridiculous ass looking outfits just because he's so cool.
Yeah, which is I just want to mark as impressive.
Yeah.
But he goes up, he takes the fight, and prior to the fight starting, Mickey starts to have what we realize is a heart attack.
Well, early in the movie, like right at the start, I can't remember when, but Mickey has like a minor heart thing. And then again,
It's when Hulk Hogan starts beating him.
Oh yeah, and then Mr. T shoves Mickey, and it seems like he starts having a heart attack, and he can't go out to the ring, and it's like it's not clear that he's dying. So Rocky's like, "All right, I'll go out there." And fight.
Mickey fucking tells him to go out and do it.
Yeah, Mickey tells him to go out and do it, and
so it's not like he's being an asshole.
And Mickey's obviously hiding the fact that he's dying of a heart attack, but he makes it look like he's just like, "Oh, I'm feeling faint." Rocky, you go out there, I'll be out in a minute, basically. And then he is like on there's like a doctor there, like basically keeping him barely alive throughout the fight.
He goes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so he goes out. He does fine for a minute. Like he goes out and basically starts emptying his clip and because literally what Mick says, like his game plan for the fight is drag this dude in the deep waters. He's never gone more than 8 rounds, I think he says. And a boxing thing is 15.
I want to say he said it's never gone more than 3.
May have never gone more than 3. Unfortunately, Mike Tyson did not start boxing until 1985. This is in 1982, so I guess they predicted Mike Tyson. But basically they say that, like, he's going to gas him, or Mick says he's going to gas himself out, so just keep going and dance around him. Fight more like, honestly, like Apollo Creed did, and just don't let him fuck you up that bad. Rocky, of course, because he's emotionally in pain and hurt, starts unloading on Mr. T, but much like Rocky in the first movie, Mr. T, I mean Clubber Lang, he gets beat up bad in the first round, but he immediately comes back on him because he has that hunger. That
Mr. T is also way bigger than Rocky, so he has more power.
I think they say he has 30 pounds on him, and in real life probably more because Sylvester Stallone is short.
I bet he has like 30 pounds in Sylvester Stallone. It's just that both of their weights are 30 pounds up from what they actually are.
Yeah, and he knocks out Rocky, and the fight ends. He goes back to where Mick is there, and Mick is dying, and Mick asks if he won the fight. He says yes.
And then Mick dies.
And so he lies to Mick to try to make him happy as he goes out.
Mm-hmm.
They go to Mick's funeral. It's revealed retroactively Mick is Jewish, which was neat.
Well, it was funny. It was like confusing at first because I was listening like it's like a funeral.
Yeah. And
it's like I'm like, wait a minute, that's Hebrew. I think there's
those are words I hear during a Shabbat service.
Yeah, and that's because you just assume he's Christian or whatever.
Yeah,
and then I'm like, what is that Jewish? And then they cut it to rabbi, and I'm like, holy fuck, Mick was Jewish the whole time.
And his name's Mickey Goldman.
It's interesting because it's just such unexpected. And it's something these movies are just they're very inclusive, like with race, and then obviously I guess. Religion in this case, but that sort of realm.
And then going on, eventually the Creed movies, literally black protagonist, like all of that.
Yeah.
Directed by Ryan Coogler, the director of Black Panther. Weirdly, I don't know whether to call him progressive or not, because I think you said this, but it flirts with saying something about race, but never really does. But anything it does, like, hint towards is a positive thing.
Yeah, I guess you could argue it kind of is on like the colorblind thing where you're like not acknowledging some of the discrimination, but I don't think they make a comment effectively like that. I guess maybe it's like Rocky should be racist based on his background of like a poor mob guy who grew up in the he wasn't in the mob, but like mob enforcer who grew up in the 70s Philadelphia. But
I can kind of respect the fact though that the film, like, if you're not going to say anything about race, doing the colorblind thing is maybe the second best option, just in that there are a bunch of white characters and a bunch of black characters, and they're just treated as equal, and like there's good white characters, good black characters, like it's just a bunch of people. And that's also just something I think about the world of sports in general, is that sports almost always gets more progressive than other areas, mostly because of the fact that, like, can you imagine how bad...
Well, it's like purely meritocratic.
Yeah.
Right?
So, like, if there's a black dude who's better at basketball than all the white dudes, one team is going to break the picket line, even if they're racist, just because they want the competitive advantage.
Yeah, obviously, other than when it was segregated, but since then, it's like it's purely meritocratic. I'm sure it's easier, like, especially back in the day, white athletes probably had more opportunity. But still, if you're fucking amazing at baseball, it doesn't matter. Like, once the league is desegregated, it doesn't matter. Like Jackie Robinson, it doesn't fucking matter that he's black. He's such a good baseball player. A team wants to sign him, right?
Yeah, winning triumphs over everything.
Yeah.
And so basically, Rocky he basically just wants to...
can I just say, the one way they touch on race... is you have Paulie.
I was about to get to
at some point they go to L.A. and like a really bad part of L.A. and it's like a black neighborhood where Creed started his training for reasons we'll explain later. But the only time they make any statement about race is Paulie is kind of racist. And it's just played for comedy because it's like Paulie is being a shithead.
Yeah, and they're all like, it's universally the film is like, Paulie, you're being an asshole.
Yeah.
Quit being racist.
It's one of the funny things is Paulie's like, I'm not sure I like these people. And he's like, Paulie, maybe they don't like you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically I would describe the tone of the movie as bro dude progressive.
Yeah.
And that like...
it's not intellectual, it's not going to discuss systemic racism, but it's definitely against racism.
Because Rocky will just go hang out with a bunch of black dudes and not think anything of it. Anyways, Rocky is sad. He wants to give up and just not do anything. But Apollo Creed comes to him and he's like, alright, I want to co-promote a rematch between you and Clubber Lang.
Oh, and it's important that Clubber Lang pissed off Apollo.
Yeah, he disrespected him.
Apollo was like special guest commentator for the first fight between Rocky and Clubber, and he went over to like shake hands with Clubber, and Clubber was like, "You're a has-been, fuck off, pussy."
Yeah.
And it pissed him off, and so he now wants to get back at Clubber.
I will also say Clubber Lang is kind of based, because if you look at it from... Honestly, I was thinking, the more I think about it, if you look at the movie from his point of view, he's kind of the good guy.
Well, he does act like an asshole.
But he's...
Like, especially to Apollo. Like, I get being mean to your opponent in a boxing match, you know? Kind of like some people do it like a mental thing where they gotta hate the guy they're gonna fight. Yeah. But he just shits on Apollo for no reason. Like, he is an asshole.
Yeah. Well, he is a has-been who's leeching off of this by being a random promoter.
No, not really. He's a commentator.
Or by being a commentator, I mean.
Is that really leeching?
I guess not.
Like, people want to hear a professional boxer's opinion on a boxing match.
Sorry. Everything he says about Rocky is true, though. When he's talking about how Rocky's gotten soft and all that shit. When
but he definitely is an asshole.
No, he's an asshole. He's just like... I guess he's sympathetic because of where he's come from. And you sometimes...
Well, the montage at the beginning definitely makes him a sympathetic character because it's showing him, like, actually training for fucking to be the greatest. And then intercut with Rocky soaking up fame.
My point being is that you see where he's come from. And sometimes to... come up from that, you have to be an asshole. So I guess I'm saying that Clubber is not as one-note a villain as he seems.
Yeah, but he is just a huge asshole.
Yeah, but Apollo gives him, and he doesn't have Mick to train him, so Apollo offers to take him back to California, where he's from in L.A., to go train at the gym he started at. Yeah. And so they fly out to California. He stays in a really, like, shithole part of town.
Basically, the reasoning for this is Apollo's saying is that you've lost the eye of the tiger, the edge. But you've lost the fire that makes you actually fucking be a real-ass fighter, and you're just a celebrity now. And he's I think at some point he basically says, like, that's what happened to me when you fucking destroyed me. Yeah. I saw that look in your eye, and you don't have it anymore. And so I'm going to take you to, like, the worst fucking place in L.A. To go train so that you can fucking regain the motivation and that level that made you become so fucking dangerous in the first place.
And this is the part where I'm talking about the bro dude anti-racism, because Rocky walks in there and he's like the only, well, aside from his posse, he's the only white guy in there, but immediately he's just like becomes friends with all the guys there and wants to train and like help them. Yeah. And at first though, Rocky is pretty fucking demoralized and he isn't training well.
Well, and also another important thing is Apollo's training him to fight like him, to be like loose and technically strong, and avoid getting hit. Like Apollo, like Muhammad Ali, sort of has this style where he gets long and he stays out of people's range and he picks at them, and he's very like
waits for them to get tired before
he has like great footwork, and he's this very technical guy with great cardio, and he's training Rocky to fight that way because Clubber has so much power that if Rocky fights his normal way,
he's gonna
just kind of going punch for punch and getting hit in order to hit, he's gonna get knocked out. So Apollo has to train him to be more finesse heavy and technical.
But at first the training isn't going well, and this leads to the beach scene with him and Adrian, which I think is one of the best scenes in the entire tetralogy that we're reviewing. Do you want to describe it?
It's basically it's an amazing scene. Rocky's basically saying, I want to quit. I'm done. And she basically says, I would love for you to be done fighting, but I know that the reason you don't want to quit just because you're done doing this. I know that's not why you want to quit. Why do you want to quit? And she basically like breaks him down. He keeps giving excuses for reasons that he wants to quit, and he eventually just admits, like, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of fighting Clubber, and that's why I want to quit. And she's like, I would love if you wanted to stop fighting, but if you're going to stop fighting because you're afraid, I'm not going to let you do that. You have to see it through and try.
And the moment that Rocky finally misses is amazing because he's like, I'm afraid! Yeah. I'm afraid! And he's just fucking yelling on his beach.
Yeah, he's screaming on the beach.
And as known genius YouTuber Endless Jess once said, Sylvester Stallone contains in him like every emotion known to man. Yeah. And he just can't articulate all that emotion because it comes out all at once.
Well, like he gets so emotional that his speech becomes like slurred.
And once again, we're making fun of him, but it is an emotional scene. I do love it.
It is a good scene, yeah. It's just that Sylvester Stallone literally sounds like he's like high or drunk or something, because he cannot articulate his words properly.
Oh, friend!
Yeah. Yeah, it's loud, but it sounds like a drunk guy, like slurring his speech.
Mm-hmm. But he basically confronts his fear, and this is the best Adrian is in all the movies, just because she's very confident and she's really evolved as a character.
Well, in this one, she ends up being the sort of the role Rocky had in the last one, and even the first one, where she believes in him. Obviously, she represents his self-belief throughout the whole series. Where in this one, he really is like ready to quit, and she pulls him back to being, sort of the motivated, she brings back his edge that he's lost.
The Eye of the Tiger. And so this is when we get to the training montage with him and Apollo is training him to do that different style. There's a running on the beach sequence that's vaguely homoerotic because...
Apollo's wearing a crop top.
Yeah, it's pretty gay.
And they jump in the water and hug each other.
Yeah, and that ended racism right there.
Yeah, it did.
When there was the interracial hug. Really...
First interracial hug on a movie.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, of course, we had the movie Predator with that epic interracial,
Is that where that handshake meeting comes from?
The epic handshake, yeah.
Is that also Carl Weathers?
Yeah, it's Carl Weathers. And
ended racism twice. That's fucking impressive.
Carl Weathers is awesome.
Yeah.
He's like the hidden MVP of every good 80s movie. Mm-hmm. But they train, you can see him with all the black fighters. He's training more like them to try to... Because, look, Rocky is not, his entire thing has been no finesse, all just, going out and just banging with dudes. And so him trying to train really technically and, get more athletic.
Well, you know what's funny about the idea? Because it is kind of posited that he's trained like a black fighter. But the thing that's funny about that is that Clubber Lang is the guy he's training to beat, who is black.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, he's training like Apollo.
Or Apollo's gym of black fighters.
Yeah, which is all black guys. But he's training to be more technical, and he gets really good at fighting technical.
Mm-hmm. Which sounds kind of unrealistic, but honestly, the more I think about it, we're MMA fans, there are guys who are one-note fighters will somehow get to the top or close to it by just one aspect of their game, and then something will break it.
Well, what's unrealistic is completely changing your style when you get defeated.
But the idea that Rocky has gotten through this with no skill and just biting down on his mouthpiece, well, he has some skill, but that's not the hardest thing to believe in the world.
Well, the only thing that's unrealistic is he doesn't really put up a guard.
Yeah.
It's realistic to take a lot of, punches that glance off if you have a good guard defense and not really, move super well, but then land big shots. But the real life the real life Rocky Marciano, had horrible footwork, but he had amazing punch power, a great chin, which, if you're not attuned to fighting, he had great resistance to punches. He didn't get knocked down.
He was hard to knock out.
Really hard to do a lot of damage to. And he would just put up a guard, walk people down, and just hit them hard as shit.
And there's a lot of knockouts one of them's in the opening Rocky 3 montage, but he would hit people so hard they would fall out of the ring between the ropes.
Yeah.
But we go into the final fight, unless there's anything else you want to talk about the training montage.
No, it's vaguely homoerotic. He learns to fight with finesse, and then, we get to the final fight. And
Clubber Lang seems pretty fucking weirded out by how Rocky's fighting. He's dodging his punches, slipping them, which is a fighting term. But he's slipping the punches, he's avoiding them. He has really good head movement. Where before Rocky stayed really stiff and just stood there in the pocket and traded. Instead, he's bobbing, he's going all around him. And he just eventually starts tearing into Mr. T as the fight goes on, because he finally takes Mick's advice and starts dancing around him and tiring him out.
Well, that's also what Apollo told him to do.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying that it's funny that Mick also had the solution already in the first fight.
Which is, he didn't train him that way. He told us what he had to do, but he didn't train him to... Because I think it's Mick trains and fights when he fought that style of just fucking...
swinging
put
and
a guard up, waddle towards him, and beat the shit out of him. You know?
The Derek Lewis strategy.
Yeah.
But he does eventually, though. He wears down Mr. T and he knocks him out. And that's the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, what do you want to say about... the ending is important. With Apollo.
Apollo has said, "You'll owe me a favor, and that's all I want in return." And the favor is that he wants to do one more fight, not publicly, just in the gym with Rocky, because it's been eating at him that he lost by 1 second, because he stood up.
And the series is tied 1-1.
Yeah. And it cuts off. It's left unclear. And I believe in the Creed movies, they claim that, they say that Apollo won, or Rocky tells Creed that Apollo won that third fight.
Mm-hmm. And overall, anything you want to say about Rocky 3?
It's real lighthearted and fun. If you're looking for something similar to Rocky 1 that has this like heart to it, and
it has a lot of heart though.
Well, this thematic like deepness, then don't watch this. But if you just want to watch something that's fun and gets you hyped, watch it.
I don't even think Rocky 1's that deep. I just want to draw a distinction between deep and profound. Because deep means it's like multi-layered and like there's a lot going on.
It's thematically rich. It's deep.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess what I would say is Rocky 3 isn't deep, but it still has some profound moments.
It's not profound.
What? The scene on the beach, is it?
No, it's not. How is that profound?
Sorry, it has some really good emotional character drama stuff.
Yeah.
I'm afraid.
Isn't profound is like very important, meaningful.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people are afraid of boxing Mr. T.
Well, no, but I'm saying what it says of like not quitting because you for a good reason instead of quitting because you're afraid.
But it's like
that's a real
there's
thing.
one scene that covers that. My point is any thematic stuff happens in like one scene. In Rocky 1, it's deep because it's rich. It's all to serve the purpose of telling the story of not quitting.
I'd also give this movie a B+ to A-. It's really good.
Yeah, it's fun.
And do you want to go into Rocky 4?
Yeah, Rocky 4
is your favorite movie,
the greatest movie ever made of all time. Mm-hmm. God, this is going to be a long synopsis, I feel. But can we just cover the synopsis really quick?
But a lot of the plot points are important.
Yeah, but okay, I'll try to do it as quickly as I can.
Mm-hmm. I'll stop you if you leave anything out.
Dolph Lundgren, a Russian guy,
is Ivan Drago.
Fucking shows up to America. His name is Ivan Drago, which is kind of funny because what do dragons have to do with Russia?
I don't know.
But
sounds scary.
He's Russian. He does steroids, and he wants to fight an American.
And the Russian state basically trains him.
He's backed by the Russian state. I think he's like an Olympic boxer for Russia, and now they want to send him to fight the American pro boxers. And basically, he wants to fight Rocky because Rocky's still the world champ. But Apollo answers the call, and it's basically Rocky has an emotional conversation with him where he basically tells him because Apollo says oh, this is about America versus Russia. But Rocky basically tells him this is about you becoming old. Apollo, you ever wonder? Or no, it's not a good voice. But okay, basically, do you ever wonder if this really isn't about you versus him? It's about you versus yourself getting older.
Is it East versus West or man versus man?
Yeah, that's a line from the song from later in the movie. But
and I want to point out, Apollo retired after Rocky 2.
Yeah.
And so he hasn't fought since Rocky knocked him out.
Yeah, he's coming out of retirement after being retired for 5 years, 6 years in the plot of the movies. And basically, Drago ends up fighting him.
Comes out.
Supposed to be an exhibition.
Apollo's kind of taking the piss.
Yeah, there's this long intro scene where there's a live band play.
Living in America by James Brown.
And is it James Brown they actually get for the movie?
I don't know if he's in the movie. I'm saying the songs by James Brown.
And basically he's taking the piss, and then Drago beats him so bad he kills him.
Yeah, he knocks him out, and he later dies of brain trauma or something.
Yeah, I think he dies in the ring.
Okay. But it's because of whatever fucking he punched him so hard his
brain bled or something. Yeah. But
Apollo dies in it.
And there's Rocky could have thrown in the towel and maybe saved Apollo, but Apollo told him not to throw in the towel, and so
Rocky honored his wish.
Guilt because he did what Apollo asked him to, but also could have saved him. And then Rocky's like, I gotta fight this guy, and his wife's like, please don't fight this guy.
I will just say, the sequence in which Rocky grieves has the greatest song in the entire series, which is Burning Heart, which we alluded to previously.
No, I don't think it is the sequence in which he grieves.
I thought it's when he's driving, when he's all sad.
No, that is...
Burning Heart.
No, it's not Burning Heart.
Oh, it's not?
No Easy Way Out.
Oh, okay.
When he's driving.
New Easy Way Out, another banger on the soundtrack.
Yeah, no, but I was getting to the drive.
Okay.
His wife's like, don't go fight Drago. And he's like, I'm going to go fight Drago. And she's like, don't do it. And he gets all mad. And he's like, I'm going to go drive my car around.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's No Easy Way Out plays where you see, like, images of him and Apollo having sex on the beach. And then, like, Apollo dead.
Mm-hmm.
And then him and Apollo training together. And then Apollo dead. And then, like, Drago's face, and then, like, him falling down, like, a future premonition of what might happen to him, and then Drago's face again, and then Apollo again, and then Drago's face again, and he starts screaming and crying, and he's driving 100 miles an hour, you know? And it's a good montage scene.
If there's one thing Sylvester Stallone knows how to direct, it's a good-ass montage scene.
And he decides, I'm going to go fight Drago. And basically the stipulation is this one will take place in Russia.
And he has to vacate his title because this isn't going to be sanctioned by, like, the International Boxing Commission.
Yeah, and he leaves the title on Apollo's grave, like on his coffin, which does make me wonder how the International Boxing Commission is going to get the heavyweight title back.
It's pretty badass.
It is cool.
It's like when Brock Lesnar was mad after WrestleMania, he just threw the belt at Vince McMahon.
Yeah. But...
Somebody says to pick it up.
Yeah, but he goes to fucking Russia... And there's this great training montage because he asked to be, like, in the middle of nowhere.
And he brings Apollo's old trainer.
Yeah. Because now he's down 2 trainers.
Yeah. And once again, the actor who plays Apollo's trainer is fucking great in this.
And basically there's this great training montage where well, at first it's just a kind of normal training montage. And then Adrian shows up and decides to support him. And... Again, in these movies, whenever Adrian decides to be on his side is when he really kicks it into high gear. There's this great training montage which sort of contrasts, which is kind of funny because it's the opposite, or maybe, like, not the opposite, but not accurate to the real situation of the Cold War. Because there is that. I do want to just say, there's an undertone of, like, Cold War America versus Russia, but I think the movie goes out of its way to disincentivize that reading of it,
which is really interesting.
Yeah, and it basically the whole point I think is kind of that it basically says that that's kind of like it's you're obviously just like projecting your personal struggle onto the fight between these big countries because what Apollo does,
which is weirdly deep.
Yeah, because Apollo basically says, "Oh, this is about America." But he obviously is just sad that he's getting older, and he tries to go fight Drago out of some nationalist bullshit, and then gets killed.
And it goes more into, we'll talk about the ending that definitely talks about this, but it's where I was talking about like the bro dude progressivism, because of the idea that by the end of the movie, the idea is like Soviets and Americans aren't that different, and we should all be friends, is like still the message of the movie.
Yeah, but basically, it's sort of it can have that reading to it, but it sort of intentionally disincentivizes the reading of this is a allegory for the Cold War, but basically
it's not even allegory. It's literally like the backdrop.
No, but I mean I understand the backdrop is, but I'm saying Rocky versus Drago is an allegory for U.S. versus Russia.
Yeah,
is what I'm saying. But basically, there's this great training montage where Rocky is using like shit he can find in the woods,
like logs.
Like he's like running on the snowy paths at like a fucking 3 feet of snow. He's like squatting logs. He's using like a wagon to lift like his entire family over his head.
Basically every Tony Ferguson training camp.
Yeah, he's basically like training with real shit, and it's intercut with Drago in this fucking high tech facility where he's shooting up steroids.
Yeah,
and like in like this gymnasium size. He's got on all this high tech exercise equipment. On with like a heart monitor hooked up, they can try.
If I remember correctly, is he just like murdering training partners? I feel
like
that's
the scene.
Yeah,
there's a scene where it's Rocky shadowboxing, intercut with Drago knocking out a bunch of training partners.
Yeah.
And basically the idea here is that Drago is technically training better, but Rocky has that fire in him, which you could claim is sort of like with the Cold War. But the thing that's interesting is kind of the idea of like, oh, you have this evil empire of Russia versus the bootstraps of Rocky. But the thing that's kind of funny is the Cold War was really two evil empires facing each other, and if one of them was the underdog, it was the USSR. Had less, established like political sort of power than the U.S. But I don't think that reading is really the main one.
It is interesting to me though that Drago, because there's seeds that it plants here of, you're talking about a lot of the Rocky movies is that the guy who wins is the guy who has the fire in his heart, right?
Yeah.
Drago, there's some internal conflict in Drago that it isn't pay off until much later. But like part of the thing of how cold he is, I think maybe this is just me reading into it, but it might be intentional too, is that he seems kind of removed from everything he's doing. Like when Apollo dies in the ring, he just goes, "If he dies, he dies."
Yeah.
Which is like very, famous line. But he doesn't seem to super care about what he's doing, and he's just kind of going through the motions.
It seems very clear the only like he's not like his personal goal isn't to beat Rocky in a boxing match. The USSR wants him to beat Rocky in a boxing match.
And that's a weirdly deep I have in my notes, Ivan Drago is a weirdly deep protagonist.
Yeah.
Mostly
he's antagonist.
Antagonist, that's what I meant. My bad. But he starts as super cartoonish. But yeah, throughout the training montage, I feel like there's maybe this is wrong, but there's like a melancholy to the tone of just him himself when he's training and shooting up steroids and shit.
I don't know.
Maybe not melancholy, but he's definitely bored looking. Like he just doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just the caliber of Dolph Lundgren's acting, but seems he's so much less passionate than Rocky, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and then that's basically that's I just wanted to address that.
Yeah.
Which is that you can read this as sort of allegorical to the Cold War, but I think really the point of the movie is that Apollo uses the war, like the Cold War sort of shit, as a justification to fight a battle versus old age, and then Rocky versus Drago is seen as this big nationalist show by the USSR where they want to prove, like, oh, we're better than America. But eventually, as you'll see, it becomes more than that, where it becomes less and more than that, where it's just about Rocky versus Drago, which then allows it to become, more powerful than, like, a war between two nations, But basically, now we're at the fight.
Yeah.
And basically, the fight, it's pretty much, it's Rocky versus Apollo again, where Rocky gets his ass beat, and then he fights back with body shots. I guess it's more even. It's probably the most even Rocky fight.
Yeah.
Except for Clubber Lang, Rocky kind of just whooped Clubber Lang's ass in the rematch.
And Clubber Lang whooped Rocky's ass in the first one.
But it's the most even Rocky fight, but Drago has a big advantage. And then as the fight goes on and Rocky proves he won't quit, he starts to be clearly winning. And
also just another like stratagem of the thing is that like, okay, in real life Sylvester Stallone is like 5'6", and Dolph Lundgren is
6'2", maybe.
Is like 6'2", so he's like 8 inches taller.
Yeah.
And in Rocky Land, Rocky's like 6 foot, and Ivan Drago's like fucking 6'8" by that. So because of that, he can only basically reach Ivan Drago's body for most of it. So he's just hammering away at this dude's ribs, like in the first Apollo fight. Yeah,
and basically it's the most even fight in Rocky. Well, it starts out Drago's whooping him, but then it becomes like a more even Rocky fight, and it gets to a slugfest where they're just going back and forth, and the crowd's starting to like Rocky because they sort of realize that, oh, this guy just has so much heart, and that's when the movie sort of rejects that like nationalist angle, and sort of the idea is that they move past their like pure nationalism, and they start to just connect to Rocky as a human being.
You want to talk about Drago's moment in his corner?
And then as it's clear that Rocky, the momentum is shifting to Rocky. In between rounds, like in one of there's like a bunch of like high up Soviet guys, some sort of political thing. Their titles aren't stated directly.
Yeah,
but one of them starts to chew Drago out. It is in Russian, so I don't know exactly what they say, but something like, you gotta fucking end this guy. You're better than him. You're disappointing us. And Drago like picks him up and fucking choke slams him. And I don't know what he says in Russian, but I assume it's like, fuck off, I'm fighting myself.
No, I've seen the subtitles.
Oh, what does he say?
He says, I'm done fighting for you, I'm fighting for me.
Yeah.
And so I've been talking about how dispassionate Drago is throughout most of the movie.
Yeah.
To me, this is a great character moment for him of
Absolutely.
him finally showing some passion. Where if he hasn't been boxing, he's been boxing for someone else, and now he finally wants to fight to make this personal and to fight because he wants to win rather than his country tells him he has to win.
Yeah.
And it makes him, especially once he comes back in Creed 2, where he's the deepest character in the entire movie.
Deepest character in the history of cinema.
Ivan Drago is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, Ivan Drago is the best written character in any movie ever, and that's a fact.
Absolutely.
If you consider the totality of Creed 2 and Rocky 4, then yes. But, okay, and then basically Rocky beats him up. He knocks him out, because in the later rounds, Rocky has the advantage of having granite for a skull.
Yeah, and also
and never
like
giving up.
Also, like Drago, he hasn't been able. There's an old adage in combat sports, which is go low to go high, and because he's like 8 inches taller, it's hard for him to reach the head. But he's been battering at his ribs so much that Drago's starting to like slump and like drop his guard, so he's able to land the shot that knocks Drago out because he's just fucking demolished.
Yeah. And then Rocky gives this speech, which is sort of the point of the movie. Yeah, exactly. He ended racism and then the Cold War. Mm-hmm. But he basically says, like, at first here, none of you liked me, and I didn't like any of you. And also, just to preface the speech, Apollo, at an early point in the movie, gives a speech about how, when he's trying to justify why he should go fight Drago, about how they can't change because they're just fighters and that's all they'll ever be. Mm-hmm. Like, that's who we are. We can't change who we are. Mm-hmm. And then Rocky basically says, like, you all changed. You all saw, and I changed. Now I changed. I understand that we all can still, like, love each other and respect. You can respect me and I can respect all of you. Mm-hmm. And he's like, if I can change and you can change, then everybody can change.
And that's where he ended the Cold War.
Yeah.
Which was very big of Rocky.
But it's basically the whole point is, like, we can grow past, like, the superficial excuse of the division that they're using of, like, oh, this is about America versus Russia, and we can change.
Which is really funny because I think the movie is almost 100% just remembered as a cheesy Cold War movie.
Yeah.
But in the movie itself, it rejects that reading.
Yeah.
Which I think, I just think it's really cool.
I think that's basically the point of the movie is to get past, like, oh, we should get past the Cold War.
I just hate that the movie is remembered for the thing that it refutes.
Yeah.
And then, like, I don't know, it's a great Rocky movie. I'd probably give it an A-.
This is my favorite Rocky movie. 95, probably.
Are you actually?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
It's the greatest movie ever made, greatest story ever told. Mm-hmm. Ivan Drago is the greatest character in the history of cinema.
Do you have any closing thoughts on Rocky 4 itself?
Rocky 4 is the best cheesy movie there's ever been. Mm-hmm. Top 20 movies there's ever been. Mm-hmm. And it has some of the best scenes in any movie ever. The training montage, the fight. And it's really just, it's pure and simple, but it just connects emotionally. Sometimes you don't need a movie to have a real complicated premise. You just need it to do some simple emotional beats really well. And that's what this does.
Absolutely. This actually kind of goes to on my YouTube channel, Wrestling with the Narrative. I talked about MJF versus Darby Allin, which I know is a match you really love as well.
Yeah.
And basically, I say that match doesn't reinvent the wheel, but it has just simple face versus heel. It does it really perfectly.
Yeah.
You don't always have to be the most complex, like avant-garde
narrative or thematically. Mm-hmm. But you can just. If you take a simple message and a simple plot and you do it really well, then it makes a great movie.
Absolutely. And then farther out, what do you have to say overall about these first 4 Rocky movies? I
think the series is underrated, and I think 1 and 4, especially 4 in my opinion, are just amazing movies. Mm-hmm. And I think 2 and 3 is fun. 2 is okay. I wouldn't watch it out of the context of it being a Rocky series. Mm-hmm. But I think it's really underrated in that it's just kind of seen similar like Rambo, where it's, these like cheesy B-action movies. But I think 1 and 4 are amazing movies that are slept on. 3 is it's a high-level B-action movie. It's like the best schlocky action movie. And then 2
that
is
opening montage in 3 is Kino.
Yeah, it's great. But I also do want to say Rocky 1 is literally Kino. Like, it's
Yeah.
actually cinema.
Yeah.
Even though 4 is not cinema at all,
Yeah.
but I love it, and it's better than most movies that are cinema.
Mhm.
But 1 is actually cinema.
Yeah, it was fucking amazing.
Yeah.
So overall, what do you have to say to people to recommend them to watch these movies?
I mean, I would just say, like, I already pretty much gave a review of all of them, but, you know, I just think it's a simple story, a simple message, but it's done so well.
Yeah.
You can't help but get emotional watching it.
If you haven't seen these movies, fucking do it. Yeah. Like, this is, we've made jokes recently about, I was talking about, like, I was making a list of things media that's made me cry, and there was like recently, Chillery and I watched an episode of Star Trek called Darmok, in which the death of a pig alien both nearly brought us to tears. And it's like, sometimes dumb shit just gets you in the feels in the best way.
Well, Mick's death.
Yeah.
I wasn't as close, but I felt a little bit of welling up. And, you know, Mickey's death is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Apollo's isn't as emotional.
No.
I think it's just kind of, it's so
Absurd.
much of a spectacle and absurd that it's kind of hard to emotionally get involved with Apollo's death versus Mickey's death. Mm-hmm. You know?
Yeah.
Like, heart attack versus beaten to death in the boxing ring it's easier to emotionally get a 80-year-old guy having a heart attack than a boxer die. I mean, it's not, people have died in the boxing ring.
Yeah.
It's just, it's like the whole scene is like fucking Apollo is holding Rocky's holding Apollo's corpse like fucking something out of the Bible or some shit.
Well, it's also like, with Mick's death, it's really drawn out, and like he slowly dies. It's pretty much boom headshot with Apollo.
Yeah. So I would say 3. That part, it's funny because 3 is like the most B action movie the series gets, but it also has the most emotional one moment.
Yeah. But overall, watch these fucking movies. Do you have anything else you want to say?
No, that's everything.
All right, then. Check back next week for the next episode of Avant Garbage.
Unless my co-host deletes the next episode.
Yep. Much like Szechuan, I will never live this part down. And go fuck yourself.